Hello and welcome to this episode of the Life of Science podcast. My name is Aishwarya Vishwamitra, and I am a final year master's student at the Indian Institute of Science, Education and Research, Mohali. For my thesis, I conducted a study on lived experiences of menopause in India. Menopause is the 1 year anniversary of a person's final period. Since a person with ovaries is born with a finite number of eggs, at a certain age, usually between 35 and 55, the number of eggs falls below a certain threshold. Estrogen is the hormone responsible for the maintenance of the menstrual cycle. Now that the body is entering a non reproductive phase, estrogen levels drop, which results in symptoms all over the body, like hot flushes and irregular periods. The phase of the body adjusting to the new, lower level of estrogen is called perimenopause. The symptoms are unique from person to person, and the duration of perimenopause varies too. So, about my research, I didn't really wake up one day and think, ooh, menopause must be fun. I've been working as a science communicator for the past 3 years. So, about a year ago, a women's health magazine asked me to write a series about menopause in India. Research everywhere, barely a menopause paper to read. Most of the papers that I found focused on hysterectomies and the biological side of menopause, so I found myself wondering, where are the stories of the people who have been through menopause? And why aren't they a part of the conversation? And thus began my research. Through qualitative interviews with menopausal and postmenopausal people, the most common complaint that I heard was about apathetic doctors and the medicalization of menopause. The common narrative is one where the person is in the doctor's office for about 10 minutes, quickly run through a bunch of tests, and then sent on their way without knowing what the word menopause even means. But one interviewee told me about her gynecologist, Dr. Shoiba Saldana, who has a different take on how menopause should be handled. By turning these appointments into counseling sessions, this Bangalore based physician has been able to put a positive spin on the mayhem menopause usually entails. She was an obstetrics and gynecology professor at St. John's Medical College until the year 2000, but she felt that there was a need to address the emotional and psychological aspects of health. She then co founded a non-profit, Enfold India, where she conducts sessions on adolescence and human sexuality and brings awareness to preventing child sexual abuse. She still practices as a gynecologist at Akura Specialty Hospital, where she has counseled many people going through menopause. In this episode, I sit down with Dr. Shoiba, who has a very interesting and I think empowering perspective on going through menopause. She believes that the trend of advising surgeries like hysterectomies has gone too far and encourages people to consider counseling while they go through this crucial phase of life. In this podcast episode, we talk about different approaches that can be helpful while still being critical of the medicalization of menopause. After all, it's a process that almost half of the population will go through. Could you tell me a little bit about your gynecology background and why you decided to undergo counseling training after becoming a medical doctor?
After I joined medicine, I love medicine. I just love it. Basically, for me, the form and function of the human body is fascinating. It's like just yesterday, a patient came and she had a baby with me around 6 years ago. And so she brought it out and said, "Do you remember this girl?" And I said, "No, of course not. She's so big." And then she said, then she just chatted with me. And then she said, "Doc, how do you feel when you see kids like this, which you've delivered and all that?" So I said, it's like when I see that little dot of light on the ultrasound, and then I see every scan with the baby growing, and then suddenly this baby arrives, and this baby is a completely unique human being. There's never going to be any other human being like this little one. And this kid will have its own their own life trajectory and experiences and things in life, and it's like I'm in awe of the human body. So then when I got gynecology, so I didn't get pediatrics, I got gynecology, and I have been so delighted because for me working with women was important. Somewhere along my medical practice, around 10 11 years after I started active gynecological practice, I realized that there is a whole huge space for counseling required. Like there's a whole emotional and psychological aspect of health. particularly for women. And so I did a course, a 1 year course in counseling and one in adolescent and child counseling, just to understand what is it that we need to understand. And then slowly, as I grew further into it, I feel it's very important for people to understand their body. Most things don't need medicines. 90% of treatment does not require medicines at all. It requires an understanding of the human body by the person, their own body. Why is my body behaving like that? And then it settles down. Then most people can take care of their own bodies, you know.
So what you said just now, which is most people can take care of their own bodies, is
Yeah.
the biggest fear that I've seen in women that I speak to, where they feel like they're not in control of their own bodies, especially during menopause. So how are you able to deliver this information to them in a way that is actually, something that they can work towards?
Though all human beings will go through the process of puberty, whether it's men, girls, boys, others, they will all go through the process of becoming a child into an adult. On the other side, this whole process of menopause, which is the eggs getting over and not functioning anymore, is specifically for people who have ovaries. Right? The testicular andropause is not so specific, no, not so well defined, though I'm sure it's there at different levels. And a lot of the times I also tell them that this midlife crisis that people used to talk to, a lot of it is about hormones. You know, it's not about midlife crisis, it's about the hormonal changes in your body. And for me, menopause is like, wow, it's becoming your own person. You're not running with your hormones. You're running with yourself, with your own thoughts and your independent feelings. And that's how I want to bring it across to. And so many women have told me, actually, you know, you put such a different idea of menopause. I always thought menopause was this horrible end of my life, and you're suddenly telling me menopause is a new phase of my life with enormous freedom. And I tell people, you know, you don't even give a damn about what people say, and they're like, yeah, I'm like, exactly, enjoy it, damn it, you know. Yeah, that's so for me, it's about showing women a different way of being for this time.
I think perspective, as you said, is so important, especially when it's coming from a medical personnel. I feel like women, and especially Indians in general, they put a lot of faith into the medical system and a lot of trust into what a doctor says, because doctors are treated with such high regard. And it's so nice that you've been able to inculcate counseling into your sessions on menopause. What kind of support do you think a woman requires from her gynecologist during her menopause?
If you look at menopause, you know, a lot of women have irregular periods and things at this around this time, and sometimes there may be heavy bleeding, scanty bleeding, irregular cycles, which often worries women who are not used to that. So one is the purely physical part of it, which is the period irregularities and the bleeding. And there's also, unfortunately, this during this perimenopause time is this issue about having to prevent everybody trying to remove your uterus. Oh, you're bleeding heavy, you get a hysterectomy done. I'm like, what is wrong with you? I was involved in the State Women's Commission committee to look at unrequired hysterectomy in the villages in one of the districts. And like there was this district where there were 720 hysterectomies done, and the youngest one who got a hysterectomy was 24. And this often happens with poorer women, of women from underprivileged classes because and castes, because they're married at 13, 14. They may have about 4 children or 5 children by the time they're 25, 28. They're exhausted, they're malnourished, and they often have mild white discharge, which is common. And then they go to the doctor, and the doctor says, oh, you know, you could get cancer. And I think, you know, you need to remove your uterus. And when I asked women, why would you do it? Why did you remove your uterus? But the doctor said, I would have cancer and I have small children who look after them. And I'm a daily wage worker. I need to go for my wages and things like that. So it's actually horrifying. Women are faced with a extremely gendered medical profession, which is only determined to remove your uterus if it's troubling you. And they say things like, but you finish with your family. And I often ask women when they say that, I said, how many times do we tell men, you're 40, you finished with your family, let's remove your testes because, you know, you may have prostate cancer. Prostate cancer is a killer. So let's just remove your testes. You don't need them anymore. You had your kids, right? Why don't we say that? So why is this need to remove women's uteruses and their ovaries? And the case where women die more often is because of heart attacks, and they die of osteoporosis because of removal of the ovaries. Osteoporosis comes much earlier. So why would you do that? And the ovarian cancer is much lower down the lane and then compared to heart attacks, which is what happens when you remove people's ovaries out of time, and even when you remove the uterus, it's not okay.
This is what one of my interviewees had to say.
In fact, one of my aunts, she's a gynecologist, says, "Why? What do you need it for? That it's over. The utility is done. Why do you want to keep it?" And but I don't. But she's not my gynecologist. It's only my aunt. Of course, if there's a serious problem and we have to do it, that's a different issue.
Correct.
But just for making a choice of, okay, you don't need it, its function is over, so just throw it out, kind of thing, doesn't gel with me that well.
In my study, there were women who refused to go to gynecologists because of the fear that their uterus would be removed. Dr. Shoiba mentions this in a rural context, so I asked her if she had seen the push for hysterectomies in urban hospitals as well.
Very much, very much. And also this new problem is that we often get cysts in the ovaries at this time.
Yes.
That's very common. And we also get fibroids in the uterus. Now it's coming in earlier and earlier. And these are all natural processes of an unnatural lifestyle, of chemicals in our foods and things like that, of stressors in our lifestyle. They're not reasons for removing the uterus and the ovaries. But people put the fear of cancer. Oh, you might get cancer, because it's so much easier for a doctor to remove all the things. Like I had a woman who told me, I removed all my plumbing. And I'm like, it's not plumbing, it's your uterus and your ovaries. What do you mean removed your plumbing? So it's very scary when they say things like that. That's all that it is, plumbing, the pathway to make a baby and to push out a baby. So things like that. So in even urban women, yes, it is. I don't know whether some doctors are there who are very much more help women go through menopause and explain that it's okay if the bleeding is heavy, they can get through it. And some people just remove your uterus.
Yeah, for sure. And the whole issue of looking at your uterus and ovaries in a negative context because of periods being stigmatized your whole life.
Yes, exactly. Like it says, your uterus is some evil organ that you now finally we can get rid of it. It's produced your babies and now get rid of it. And heaven help you if you're a woman who has not had children, or not been able to have kids. The stigmatization is horrible. And I tell women, you have been treated as a walking uterus all your life.
Yeah, 100%. And I never thought about fibroids being something that's manageable, because I always hear it as the precursor to a hysterectomy.
Exactly. And I'm like, no, I have so many patients of mine who at 40, 45 were detected. I mean, almost 80% of women nowadays have fibroids after 40. And I believe it's because the chemicals in the water, it's because of our lifestyle, excessive fats, trans fats, all sorts of things. So I'm like, hey, this is normal. If you had little swellings here and here and here, would you just sit and operate on all of them? They're like, no, then why?
I had heard that you can prepare your body for menopause. You can really prepare yourself and make sure that the symptoms are not as severe later on. But I think, again, we come back to that whole concept of not even knowing what menopause is until you're in it.
So I tell women that, of course, you must take care of your body. There are higher risks of cancers. Breast cancer is one of the commonest cancers in urban women, cervical cancer in rural women. But all you need is to do checkups. And if you know what your breasts feel like, you will make out if there's a lump. And I have two friends who are breast cancer surgeons who both told me that all women who've come to them with feeling a lump, which was on self examination, have always come in stage 1 and 2. Rather than waiting to go to a doctor and find out if you have a problem and things like that. I said, just examine your breast yourself. What's wrong? Again, that we are so uncomfortable touching our own bodies, about knowing our own bodies, like so many women have never seen the genitals. I said, like, take a mirror and see what you look like down there. And they're like, never did it. I'm like, you have to learn about your body, the whole context of it's dirty and chi and all this stuff, young women, older women. I tell them, just see what it looks like, guys. So that's where the gender of society comes in. Men can pull down their zips and pee anywhere and flash their genitals anywhere. Nobody thinks it's a big deal. But for women, that area is dirty. Keep it covered, keep it shut, don't look at it. So you end up saying, oh, even I shouldn't look at it.
Very true. There's so much ingrained stigmatization that makes for problems later on. Just the whole concept of not liking your body as a woman is definitely something that is so damaging.
In fact, I tell women, when they're 45 or 40 and they're having these heavy periods, they say, I messed up car seats and this seat and my clothes were ruined. And, I went to a party and then I suddenly this blots and all. I'm like, what's wrong in staining stuff? If you were vomiting or something, or you had loose motions, people would take care of you. Why is it that when your period is heavy and why you now stigmatized rather than being taken care of, which is first thing. And second thing, you just tell your uterus, I love you because you gave me such beautiful baby. And now it's time for you to leave and you want to have a few tantrums before you go for it. I'm fine. Enjoy yourself. It's like teenagers having tantrums, We handle it when our kids are throwing tantrums and they slam doors and they think you're a stupid parent and you're an idiot. And it's beautiful. It's about growing up, isn't it?
But how about women who have chosen not to have children? So how do they look at their uterus in a positive way?
Creativity. I'm like, Mamata Banerjee and Jayalalitha and Mother Teresa and all these fantastic women who've done such fabulous stuff and not had babies. I said, it's about creativity. It's not that you have to have kids. It's about creative energy. Babies is just one part of it. And I tell people you don't have to have babies to have used your uterus well.
That is so true.
Yeah. I said, there's no need. You don't have to have a baby unless you want to. Feel totally fine. If you've not had a kid, and especially nowadays, at least 10% of couples come and say, we don't want to have kids. We like kids, but we don't want to have kids because we don't think the world is a great place to have kids. There's just 7.2 billion people in the world. We don't need to add anymore. I'm like, super, perfect. Never have a baby if you don't want to.
Yeah, of course. While, of course, the post-menopause life can be something that's really beautiful, during perimenopause in general, how do you kind of convey this positivity of getting, of being able to go through it and not just manage it? And because I feel like the managing narrative is so much more than the flourishing one.
Yeah. So, because I always tell them that, your body is going through a change. So, for example, women need more sleep at this time. So, there are 4 times in your life, particularly for women, when they need more sleep. First is when you're a baby, when you're born. The second time is during teenage. When you're going through teenage, you need 9 to 10 hours of sleep because your body is changing. The third time is during the first 3 months of pregnancy because your body is changing from a non pregnant to a pregnant state. And then finally, menopause is a time when your body is hugely changing from a reproductive to a non reproductive state. And so you need sleep. So women normally run on 6 hours sleep. They sleep at 12 o'clock because they close the house down in the kitchen and feed every single person who eats at different times. And then they go to sleep. And normally they would get up at 5:36 and start the next day. If they're working, they're cooking, packing lunches, whatever it is, taking care of elders. They have a very packed life. And most often they don't get that afternoon sleep either. And I tell them your body is going through changes. The one thing you need is sleep. And you need to sleep 8 hours or 7 hours. And they say, yeah, I'm so tired when I get up in the morning. So then either, you have to get up, sleep earlier and, put the kitchen away. You don't have to feed everybody before you leave. And they say, yeah, that's true. And I say, when you're hungry, you need to eat. So at 7:30 or 8, you're hungry, you just eat. And they say, yeah, earlier I would call my kids and my husband and everybody and say, come and eat, come and eat. And now I'm like, I'm going to eat my food and I'm not going to listen for anybody. And I'm going to keep the food on the table. And menopause actually is a clash between how you've grown up socially to look after your family and not look after yourself, with this deep desire of your body to take care of yourself. Like, I need to sleep, I need to eat, I don't want to eat this food, I want to eat that food. A lot of women say, I start cooking food I like to eat. I never liked this. I like this, but nobody likes it in my house. So I never cooked it. Now I cook a little bit and eat. I'm like, yes, do that. So it's not a fight. You're not fighting your own body and you're not fighting your family. You're just letting them know this is the levels. And sometimes, very often, women say, when I'm telling them you get crabbity or irritable, you just want to run away. And I so often tell women, your one thing you keep saying is, I'm going to leave now. I'm going to run away. Husband, kids, you just keep the house and you manage what you want to do. I'm going to go and stay, in an ashram or someplace, and I just want 2 meals a day cooked for me and I don't give a damn. And they say, yes, that's what I keep saying. And there is this deep, sort of sort of ennui from doing this housework, putting away clothes and cleaning, because that, no matter how high a ranking an officer you are in your office, you are still doing that at home, so that is what comes up. So I try to explain that and I tell them, listen, and when the husbands are there, I tell them, listen, your wife's taken care of house and hearth. for the last 20, 25 years. Now for the next 3, 4 years, you've got to look after her.
Mm.
And that's the way it is.
This is what one of my interviewees had to say.
And I told my big sister, she's staying in America now. She told, when once ladies get this menopause stage started, their husbands will take care of so much of their wives, because don't put stress on mama. And they helped the wives so much because she's in menopause. And like that, so much care they will take. Like that, my sister told. But in India, husbands nothing, bother nothing. Menopause day, kuch bhi nahi. Kaam karo, wo karo, ye karo, like that they will tell. But here, kitna care le rahe, like that. The same dialogue I told to my husband. See, you have to take care of me and cook for me and don't make stress for me. Hey, who told all these things? Like that he's telling.
In a gynecologist capacity, are you able to address social factors that play a role in a woman's menopause? Like, for example, if her husbands are not supportive, what are you able to do?
Tell them you don't need to fight, because, in the unequal society we live in, especially for women who grow up, it's very difficult to fight. And when you fight against a husband, or say parents, there are women who are not married or single and they stay with their parents. So again, there's that pressure, the parents expect them to take care of them, and they want some amount of freedom. And I said, you don't have to fight, because when you get into a fight, you often will lose the battle. Because there's a limit to how much women can scream and a guy can scream, just because of the power differential. Fighting with your parents, for women who live with their parents, they take care of their parents, there's a sense of, I don't want to hurt them. So I said, you're not fighting, you're just putting down boundaries. For the first time in their lives, women at menopause are learning about boundaries. Like, if I don't feel like having sex, I say no, that's it. They're like, really, you can do things like that? I'm like,
yeah. And I think that's why menopause counseling is so important, because it's like, to me, it seems like, oh, these things should be obvious, but it really isn't to women who've lived their whole lives in a certain submissive way.
And I tell them, this is the best time of your life. 50 is not when you grow old. Your menopause is not when you grow old. It's becoming your own person. Now you can travel, you can move. You don't need to worry. Your kids are leaving home. Or if you're a single woman now, all this life you were worried about, how do I go out? Where do I go? Just go, travel, explore your potential, do the stuff, take up a course, do all the things you never thought you could do.
Yes.
I tell women that, you feel old. Actually, there's a very interesting phase when the periods are slowing down, where you get up in the morning with your back stiff, your knees hurt, you feel old, and you look at yourself and say, I'm growing old. But I tell them this is a 3 to 4 years phase, and on the other side, you'll get up and you will be so much more energetic. And I've seen that. I've had women 55, 56 who are walking down the road, and they say, and they're going in their yoga suits and all, and they're like, hey doc, you remember when I was 47, 48, I would come and sit in the clinic and just cry, saying I'm growing old, I can't sit down anymore, my knees are jammed, my arms are jammed, I don't have any energy. And I'm saying that's the teenage process, where teenagers just sleep for ages. Every time you tell them do something, they're like, I'm so tired, or they're like, I don't want to do it, and they're sleeping on the sofa all the time, and you're like, what is happening? As if you're going through the same phase, and you will come out of it. This is temporary. And also emotionally, crying very easy. Emotions are just there. You watch your serial, you start crying. Somebody says something, you start crying. Emotionally, you're just like just crying all the time. Watering can. I say good, because these are all the 40 years of emotions which you're pulling out, and just let it go. Cry. Just tell everybody, listen, keep hankies around. I'm going to cry. That's it. It doesn't mean there's something wrong. I'm not depressed. I'm not angry. I'm just cry. I have the right to cry. You don't have to hide your tears. You don't have to be strong. You don't have to be, stoic. Just be angry when you are. And if you say things, and I just tell them that when you're talking to kids or people, the words you use are important. But you have to be able to express your feelings. There's nothing wrong with that. Because all they've been told is you can't cry, you can't laugh very loudly, you shouldn't be angry. So this whole, I tell them, men can get angry and everybody still loves them, and you still allow your husband back into the house when he shouts and screams. So why not you? Understand your anger and use it wisely is very important. So it's not about either expressing or suppressing your anger, but about understanding that anger is about injustice, it's about unfulfilled expectations. And if you look into that, you understand anger is a secondary emotion, and you can understand yourself if you really feel that, but it's also okay to get mad and shout and yell and come back later and say, I'm sorry, I was angry, but the reason I was angry was right. It's just that maybe I spoke a little more, and clean up the mess after you finish. What the heck? If guys were taught that from the time they were young, we would have so much less domestic violence all over.
It's just, really taking ownership of every factor of your body, every part of it.
Yes. And taking help for when you can't, because they will be around. So if you look at depression at about at least 10 to 15% around the world, there will be some women. So that's the only place where I'm a little careful about, because there may be some women who are depressed around menopause time. So picking up those people. So sometimes I do a little more of psychiatric references or send to a therapist when I feel they have a lot of burdens they're carrying and a lot of stuff they have to process, which needs to be done. So those people are the ones I would refer for therapy or to a psychiatrist if I feel they need antidepressants.
Yeah, but that check is definitely there, which I think is very valued. So my final question for you is, how has language and the medical system been able to ungender how they view menopause? We have a lot of trans men.
Yeah. So see, so one of the things is that for a lot of transgender people who have had sex reassignment surgery, or what we call as sex affirmative surgery now, their ovaries are removed and it's replaced by
Exactly.
androgens. I have operated on, done hysterectomies on in 21. They were so happy. Yay! I got you to my uterus. Thank you, doctor. I'm so happy. I'm so thrilled. I'm like, all right, well. So for them, it's such pleasure. So for them, it's a happy time.
Yeah.
And I think if you look at each human being as unique, each one, as I said, that little baby who grows up, so the baby may be any gender, maybe any sexual identity, has their own experiences which goes through. So I think we should look at each human being as an individual and look at how they can be supported in the system, rather than
Yes.
looking just at small groups,
Mm.
women who haven't had children, women who are not married, women who are house keeping, who have stayed home, transgender people. What about gender neutral people, or people who never felt the need to get married, or didn't find somebody they wanted to marry,
Mm.
never found a partner they liked, weren't very sure about their own sexuality? They will also reach menopause. So everybody.
Very
And men
true.
also, so many times when I ask the husbands, do you sometimes feel low? Do you feel my life is meaningless? Do you sometimes feel I want to run away from things? And they go, yes. But men are not meant to say things like that. So they're like,
There's basically a lot of conversations that need to be had.
yes, for everybody. It's about something like education. Education needs to be individualized for each person, and each person's experience is different through the education process, but everybody needs some type of education.
That's very well put. Yes. So, to summarize, how do you think the medical system can really empower menopause?
First of all, doctors need to read up more about menopause to understand the huge amount of the psychological and emotional changes besides the physical changes. And they need to be more classes on menopause. I mean, you don't have menopause clinic as a health issue. You have menopausal clinic as a, like we have adolescent sexuality and adolescent health and communication skills. These are life skills. So handling your menopause is a life skill, not a medical problem.
And you definitely feel like menopause counseling needs to be something
Yes, yes.
that's incorporated. Thank you so much. I learned so much from you today, because a lot of what you said are things that people know, but they've just buried it down so deeply because they feel like they can never attain that. And I really hope that through your words, they're able to kind of rediscover themselves and rediscover what menopause can mean.
Thank you. Thank you. And I'm so delighted, and I would like to read your work ultimately when you
Definitely.
complete your work. I would be so delighted to read it. Thank
Of
you so
course.
much.
Of course. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Life of Science podcast. This podcast is produced by me, Aishwarya Vishwamitra, and the featured image was illustrated by Aisha Punjabi. Do you have a menopause experience to share? Please fill out the form in the podcast description to get in touch with me. You can also find me on social media platforms where I will continue to share my research findings. Don't forget to log on to www.thelifeofscience.com to read more such stories and listen to more podcasts. TheLifeOfScience.com Season 6 is supported by contributors to our crowdfunding campaign, STEM Peers, and also by a grant from the Thakur Family Foundation. Thakur Family Foundation has not exercised any editorial control over the contents of this episode.